All right, so this is Lake Vale Cemetery. The sign tells you that, but it had other names in the past. All right, like they call it Pine Hill Cemetery, and the lakes are over that way, three in a row. So that's why it gave it by the end this name. But what about Vale? They figured out it wasn't really a hill. It was when we go in there, it's more up and down valley kind of terrain, right? Now, Belchertown was settled in 1731, and when was the cemetery born? Well, no one knows. All right. All right. So look at my handout, and it tells you this is a program funded by the Belchertown Local Cultural Council, which is part of the Massachusetts Cultural Council. It's the last of three that I give this year, and hopefully three next year, and also sponsored by the Holy Preservation Trust. And and if you want to know about these tours, look at my business card, and every tour I've ever given over the last 11 years on there. And in January, I'll start a new series, so my schedule is starting to form already. And so you can look at that. Okay, so what we're going to do is go through a very old cemetery. And Belchertown is one of very few communities that could say that it has a correct arrangement of gravestones for any burial. Only three communities I've been to, and I've probably researched very intensely about 40 communities. Only three have a correct arrangement of burial stones for at least one burial. And in this cemetery, there are four. Right? And the further I get out from the Connecticut River Valley, the more likely you'll find those are correct arrangements. So I'm going to show you that plus other things in this cemetery. But we can't deny the modern part. This modern part came around probably in the 50s. The fence that you see was put here in 1960, still great shape. The stone fence around the other one was put in 1935. And the Stebbins family paid for the hole to be put in, and it was contracted locally from there. And they did a great job. It's now 90 years old and still in wonderful shape. Usually, especially on terrain like that, it'll start to fall. Right now behind you are a lot of wonderful stones. And we'll go to one over here. So I want to do one in the modern section. Gerald Feldman. Did anyone ever know him in life? You know him?
My dad.
Your dad. Oh my gosh. So you can tell us a little bit about him, but he won the Purple Heart and the Bronze Star for his activities during World War II in Korea. And he was in the major in the U.S. Army. Wonderful. I had two uncles that did exactly the same thing. They were in World War II in Korea. And one of them has the Bronze Star also. So he must have stayed in the Army a long time then.
Yes, he did. He was in 22 years.
How many?
22 years.
Wow.
But he was very young. He actually falsified his birth certificate to get into the Korean War.
Oh, goodness.
So they didn't find out for many years, so they gave him credit and let him stay. So he was still fairly young when he retired and went on to civilian.
Did he join when he was like 16 or something?
16 and a half.
Wow.
Yeah. All right.
I heard a lot of people did that. And
He was a great man. Really shared a lot with us. His Purple Heart was won during a battle when he was jumped off of a hillside and luckily landed in a tree, which saved his life and had injured his arm, which was a problem the rest of his life. But loved the military and loved our country.
good. And this is the real stone back here.
Correct.
Yes. So the Feldman stone, Gerald and Elizabeth's your mother?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll be on the other side.
And you'll be on the other side. Is your name back there now?
Not yet.
Okay. Strangely enough, you look around the cemetery, the modern part should have more people in it. But most of them are going to the Mount Hope or South Cemetery. But this one, still an open cemetery, it'd be a great place to be buried. Next to the lakes, next to a very peaceful setting. Okay, now if you look at this stone wall, there's a break and there's a wrought iron gate over there. So we're going to meet there to go into the very old part. Okay, any questions at this point? Is in cities where they know there's vandalism around, they hardly ever lock them out in rural locations. And like people have pointed out, there's some stones back here. Some are footstones, some are headstones. They belong somewhere. Now look at the layout of the grounds, and you can tell right away why they call it Lake Vale. Right near the lakes, and it looks up and down here. Okay, so we're going to try to visit the four corners as best we can, and we're going to try to include very interesting burials. Now, this cemetery has two Potter's Field. The reason why, it's older than the Revolutionary War, which means that the burials that took place in the very beginning, and I'll be showing you those in that far corner, lied on an east-west axis, but pointing such that the person would rise up towards the west. And I'll show you how that happens a little later on. But Potter's Fields are always in the back right corner of the burials. So a person that's buried very early on could reach back right and see a Potter's Field. So there's one Potter's Field in the far corner over there. And then after the Revolutionary War, people who buried this direction, their back right hand would have the Potter's Field. So look in this back corner here. It's very empty. That's the Potter's Field nowadays. All right. Since they had to change direction and keep the Potter's Field in back, there's two in this cemetery. And that's only true in cemeteries older than the Revolutionary War itself. And Belchertown has 3 of those cemeteries. Okay. So I'm going to try to do stones in all the corners. You can see the brown stones over here, but these are not the oldest in the whole cemetery. You can see a lot of limestones around, but we want to find a very special stone. All right, so this person right here died because of the Civil War. He died in 1965. He died about 3 months after the Civil War ended. He died because of illness that he acquired during the Civil War. It brought him back to Belchertown. He could not get rid of that illness, and he would die from it. His name is Hiram Freeman. His brother is in the cemetery somewhere, probably without a stone. His aunt's in the cemetery, and he's African American. All right. Before the Civil War, this person would have been buried in the Potter's Field automatically in Massachusetts. So African Americans could not be buried in the main body of a cemetery until after the Civil War, or during the Civil War and after. Because the North started the war to destroy slavery, and what happened finally, one consequence, you could now, being an African American, be buried in the regular part of a cemetery. So if you go around to the Protestant cemeteries of the Connecticut River Valley and look for pre-19 or 1860 burials of African American, you're always going to find them in a Potter's Field, no matter what cemetery you're in. If you're in the West Street Cemetery in Amherst, if you're in a particular cemetery in Northampton, in Holyoke also. So if he had relatives that died earlier than 1860, you would probably not find a stone, and they would probably be in one of the potter's fields of a Protestant cemetery. Incredible. Massachusetts started the abolitionist movement, and they pushed the hardest of any state, but still there was enough resistance in these Protestant churches not to allow African Americans inside the body of the cemetery. So this is very unusual and one of the first. I don't know where his brother came back from the Civil War. He's buried somewhere. His stone's probably lost somewhere. Okay, and
Mabel.
this is what?
Mabel Freeman.
This is Mabel. This is his aunt then.
His aunt.
Yeah. So his aunt is right here. I wonder if his brother is right here then. Okay, it's quite possible. Now back then, you didn't have to pay for your plots. That paying for plots didn't happen till around like maybe the 1880s. People started getting charged for plots. So anyone belonging to a church, any Protestant church in Belchertown, could be buried in a Protestant cemetery for free. All right. So I wonder if he's right here. Probably is. Okay. Now notice, you can't bury people here. Look at the emptiness of these vales or valleys. You cannot bury people down in a valley. The reason why, in April and May, they would be filled with water or soaked ground. If you bury someone there, after a few years, the coffin and the body would wear out very quickly. So they never allow people to be buried there in the 1800s. And even today, you cannot be burying people downwards in gullies, right? So there's no one near here, and probably towards the back, another one. So there's a lot of emptiness. Why didn't they fill them in? Well, there was no beautification of cemeteries back in 1700. Okay, so what we're going to do now is go to the next corner, and we're going to see at least one of Potter's Field. Any questions here? Is he on Memorial in the middle of the green in Belchertown?
Freeman?
Don't know.
I don't know. I know, he might be related to, there's an effort to get a Revolutionary War African American. They might be related. His name is Freeman.
Probably is remaining because they stayed a long time in Belchertown.
Yeah.
There is another cemetery in Belchertown that's a lot more African American.
No.
I think it's at the Dwight Cemetery.
So what was his first name?
Hiram, Hiram.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll travel over this way. Okay, so in this cemetery there are 4 stones that meet all the requirements of the way they were buried in the olden days. Now, in 1775 and 1776, there was a change of direction that burials happened, but they always happened until the late 1830s on an east-west axis. This is an east-west axis, all right? Perfectly. I came in with a compass. It's perfectly in line, and they always are unless they're shifted around. So this person right here, this is the headstone of this person in memory of Mr. Joseph Smith, who died in 1786, and it has a very long epitaph. 1786, after the Revolution, right? Anyone that was buried in Protestant cemetery from 1775 onwards to the late 1830s is buried not only in the east-west axis, but also with their body in a certain direction. This is a headstone, right? So the head of the person is right here. This is a footstone, so the feet of the person are right here. And it says Mr. Joseph Smith Jr. His father and his son are buried inside the cemetery. Notice that stone, smaller, but the same shape. So it has little wings on the side? Yes. If you look on the back of this one, you see the back of that one, they look the same. The engraving or inscription is the same text. They're made at the same time. Notice how far apart they are, about 6 feet. The coffin for this person was about 6 feet. So his head is there, his feet is there. Why is it that way? Well, if you're on the last Belchertown tour, I told you, that person needs to rise up on the resurrection day and be able to see the resurrection. Before the Revolutionary War, they would not have seen it. They would rise up towards the west. But after the Revolutionary War, they would have burial practices. The person would rise up towards east and see that resurrection. All right, so we know where his head is and his feet. So twice today I get to show you in person. I'm not going to really resurrect. I wish. So here, and notice the feet are perfectly fitting for an adult, right? So that person would rise, torso upwards, and see the resurrection directly in the east. It was Protestant theological theory that the resurrection would take place in the eastern direction. Okay, so Belchertown has something very rare. It has a stone that is in its original format. Why did they make them this way? Because they wanted to have people come into a cemetery, always have at least 2 feet to the next stone, this way and in the back too. They wanted the person inscription to face out on both because it was taboo to step on the grave of a person. So they could have came here, or they could have came over here and seen, oh, this is Joseph Smith, my father, right? And this is where he's buried. Okay, why is it still here? Why aren't there many more? Because usually the footstones go away, right? And also because a lot of stones have been shifted around by superintendents of cemeteries for other reasons. But this cemetery has one, in fact, it has 4 inside of it like this, and I'll show you as many as I can, and it has 2 more that are close, and I think they actually might be correct, but their footstone has a different shape than the headstone, which is very unusual, so I'm not very sure. All right, but this is actually one, and this is very rare. What did they do before the Revolutionary War? Well, I'll show you that along the way. Now look in the corner over here. That would be the oldest of the 2 Potter's Field. Because prior to the Revolutionary War, the front of the cemetery would have been over there, the back over here, this is the back right. And so where it starts to go up again, they probably were burying people that were poor, plus babies that the parents could not pay for a full adult burial. Okay? So back there, and there's now stones there. Notice that they left this with its chain link fence, and there's a gap over there. They want people to have the ability to get through there. All right. So any questions on this burial? This is very unique. I've only found at this point 16 in my life like this, and 4 are in Belchertown, in the cemetery. Okay, so let's go to one that's even older.
I was in Georgetown. Yeah.
Okay, so we're looking at this stone right in front of us here. And what we found over there on Joseph Smith, the headstone's inscription were pointing towards the west. Notice that it's different here. The inscription's pointing towards the east. Right? So many things could have happened. Did this fall down and someone shifted around? No, because any burial prior to the start of the Revolutionary War would have been backwards from what I just showed you. All right. Now this is not perfect. If it was, it'd be the only perfect arrangement pre-Revolutionary War that I've ever seen in the Connecticut Valley, and I've experienced a lot of it. But it's very close. Now I do not want the superintendent to change it because someone shifted it, but they shifted so long ago, he should not change it around. But this is a headstone. His footstone is over here. Now, it should have the same shape and being made of the same rock and have the same text. It did have wings to it, but erosion after 270 years has made it gone away. That's William Hannum, and that's WH, right? Yes. So this is a correct headstone for this person. He died in 1755, right? Any pre-Revolutionary War burial is different. So his headstone's here, his head is here, but his feet are not there. His head is here, and his feet are about here. So why is this footstone over there? What happened was that it probably fell at some point, and the superintendent knew that, oh, everyone else in the cemetery has their footstone towards the east. He probably picked it up, stuck it in the ground over there, right? Also, you're supposed to have it pointing inscriptions out. So this is out, that's correct, and his footstone would have been over here pointing out that way. So where is his head? Here. His feet are here. So he's buried on Resurrection Day. He would rise up and face the west. Why such a drastic change in orientation? Well, the change happened because not only did the Americans engage the British militarily, they also separated politically with the Declaration of Independence, and they also changed, because of freedom, their economy prospered to an incredible degree starting right after the Revolutionary War. But also, religion changed, and religious values changed. Before the Revolutionary War, in New England, you're mostly under the thought of the congregational religion, which was a very harsh religion in the very beginning. You would never know that because congregational religion now is probably the most liberal religion in the United States. But in pre-Revolutionary War, they were very harsh. If you don't believe that, how many witches were killed in Massachusetts? And who were they killed by? They were killed by the Congregationalist religion. They were very harsh. And they killed about 83 witches. And the model is a very famous one that comes out of Northampton. And a pastor there named Jonathan Edward told his parishioners in the 1730s, you are sinners in the hands of an angry God. After the Revolutionary War, that kind of philosophy was gone very quickly, and with it became a new freedom of thought. So burial practices changed drastically. So this person is buried here. And you would rise upwards, and he would face towards the west. All right? So if you take this stone, bring it over here, and what direction would you face it? Where would you face that stone? If it was correct. You'd face the inscription towards the west. So that you'd have the correct arrangement. If someone did that, this would be the only correct arrangement in the whole Connecticut River Valley that I've ever found. So many of these stones have been changed through the years and forced into new patterns that you don't find that situation anymore. In fact, it's incredibly hard to find even the headstones of the old ones in the correct direction. So many superintendents have forced them into a new direction, like that one you saw. So that a lot of cemeteries would have the old ones going the other way. So you have a miracle here. Nothing's been changed except that. Now, I do not want the superintendent to take that, put it there, because it was probably changed about 140 years ago. From 1880 to 19 teens, there was American cemetery beautification movement, and they started forcing cemeteries into certain patterns of the late 1880s. And that's why you don't have many around. But you can actually, even if you can't read this one, you can figure out this person is buried probably after the Revolution because the inscription's this way. And you can go through a lot of these and start to figure out what's going on. So right in front of you, is that correct? Okay, it's one of the Hannah family. Is the stone correct?
I don't think so.
Yes. Yes. So this one's correct. So you know for sure this should not be here because his body is head here, feet here, right? And then you'd have footstone here. So that should be moved over here. His footstone probably under the surface somewhere. Okay, and you know what it looks like, and then this is probably the Haddam region. So if this probably is too. This one says 1779 on it. By the standards of 1779, is this correct? The inscription's out this way? Yes. Okay, so now you start to see the pattern. Amazing, huh? Now also notice that there's hardly any straight rows anywhere. If you go to a Catholic cemetery, everything is perfectly straight. In modern Protestant cemeteries, perfectly straight. And also notice that this was on a perfect east-west axis, here. So you can line your compass up and get the directions from it, north, south, east, west. After 1830, no one cared. Because another kind of cemetery came around, instead of these old churchyard cemeteries, you had a garden-style cemetery come around. The first ever was in Massachusetts, and the lineup was any compass direction you wanted to have. And so you notice the later ones come on a different angle. All right? Now, I said there was one correct arrangement. This is, in my standards, not correct unless you move the footstone. So are there other around? There should be 3 more. All right? Could you see them? And it says a lot on there, including that he probably fought in the Revolutionary War. Samuel Adams. That footstone over there says Samuel Adams. So that's his footstone. Same shape, same type of rock, same inscription if you could see it. In memory of Samuel Hannum, who died 1780. But also it tells you on the left hand of this grave lies an infant son of Samuel and his wife Mary, who died in 1771. So, incredibly, if you follow what I did, he's buried, his head is right here, his feet are right there. Okay? Now his son is to his left, so his left is over here, his son is right here, infant son. Where's the head of the son? His son died in 1771.
Oh.
Pre-Revolutionary War, right? By a little bit. The son head would be right here. The feet would be right here. So you have another very rare event where on the same stone you have information that tells you who they are, but it also now you can figure out how they were buried. Now, incredibly, the inscription was written after Samuel Haddam died, right? And then they knew where his left side would be, so they wrote all that rest of it in. Where is his wife? Probably a stone was there, probably was there, probably there's a footstone. Okay? So you're having a lot of very rare things here. And the only reason it stayed on that axis was because no one messed around with the cemetery, which itself is extremely rare. If you go into old Protestant cemeteries of Springfield, Northampton, all the big cities, all the little towns, you'll find them all changed around, including as small as Granby, including as small as Long Meadow. Everything's changed around. So you have here a cemetery where it's mostly in the correct order. Okay? So, this is number 2. There are thus 2 more, plus there's 2 that are very close. But you're starting to get the sense. There's also 1 stone starting to tip over because of that tree. That is a double barren stone. So we're going to look at one close by. See what else is going on. We're going to come to a stone over here. Okay, so it's this one. So we're looking at the front of this stone here. Is she buried correct by the year? Well, I think it says Caitlin Clark, right? And it says definitely 1820 or so. So her head is here. And where's her feet? Back here. Now when I go back here, there's a stone here. And it says CC on it. Right? Caitlin Clark, CC. They match off. The type of stone it matches, even though this one looks brown, the brown is actually a type of brown algae. But there's one big problem, and I'm not happy with this, because the footstone shape should match the headstone shape. So you notice that it has little wings on for the side here. That one doesn't have wings on the side. All right. Did they change them so drastically by 1820s they weren't trying to match off the footstone? Maybe. If another problem is that someone's moved this stone by a tiniest bit, it used to face this way, and now it faces a little off, shifted by 10 to 15 degrees. But that's because they were trying to make a whole line here on purpose. Okay? And also there's another footstone right here. So why are all these things happening? Superintendents are seeing fallen stones and they're putting them up. And that's why I checked very hard for CC, tried to find another CC in this cemetery. And is there another CC? There is. But she doesn't have the right shape either. So is something drastically happened? Yes. And what drastically has happened to make the footstones different? So that is her footstone, but the footstone's not the same shape. But the drastic change is this. From about 1816 onwards, a new style of putting up the stones occurs, and that's because a new style of gravestone comes in. It's called the obelisk, and you probably know of a guy named Napoleon. And when Napoleon invaded Egypt, he was so enthralled by all of Egyptology, and so was in Europe, since he brought back a lot of Egyptian items. From 1813 onwards, you started having a lot of Egyptian-looking monuments around the world, which include obelisks. Now, in this cemetery, I think there's one over there, but the whole mentality changed. In front of and behind obelisks, you have these personal stones. And what happened to the headstone, footstone arrangement, they started to go away, and when it continued, they would not use necessarily a footstone that matched the headstone. Okay, so this is number 3. Number 4 is over there somewhere, and so you have the 4 footstone headstones that are in correct position. And they're the only ones. There are none in South Cemetery that are found or in the other cemeteries. This is it. Why this cemetery? Probably because it's so rural, and also the superintendent noticed that the ground was so different, he didn't start shifting things around. Right? So one more corner to go into. Any questions here? That was a lot of information.
Could I just ask one? You said these were church burial yards. So was there a church here?
That's a good question. There probably was. So Belchertown was settled in 1731, and it became a town in 1761. Absolutely, in 1761, they did have a church because Massachusetts would not give them their incorporation letter. Because before you become one, you need to have a church meeting house, which is usually the same thing. But you would also have a cemetery, which this place had two of them, and you also need schools, so forth. Or else you would never become a town. So there was, by 1761, at least one church somewhere. Where it was, I don't know. Now, since this is so far, and Belchertown's so big, Belchertown's the third largest community in Massachusetts by geographic size. Thus, it's enormous, and you have things spread out so far around that it was probably settled twice. Probably settled once around the area near the South Cemetery, and then also settled here about the same time. Right? And now it's probably around 1731. South Cemetery was bought by what would become Belchertown in 1743. Does this cemetery predate it? I don't know. It might. There were settlers in 1731. If that cemetery was bought in 1743, where for 12 years would they have been buried? They had no connection with other towns. So, for instance, South Hadley and Granby have connections to Hadley. Pelham and other communities around Amherst had connections to Amherst and Hadley. Springfield had lots of connection. And when there were pioneer settlers who died, they would bring them back to the home community for a few years. Belchertown did not have that. So, is this the oldest cemetery in Belchertown? It could be, right? Because there would be babies being buried because they would die very young. This might be it, but there's no proof. So I can't find the deed. The oldest headstone is like the 1755 one. We don't know. But there must be somewhere. All right, any other questions? Okay, so let's go to the next corner. Now this section is the Potter's Field. Potter's Field is always the back right hand of where people were buried. So that's considered to be the front after the Revolutionary War. This is the back, this is the right hand. And you know that if you walk around the cemetery and find a flat part where it's empty. Almost always the easiest way to find it in one of the back corners. So right here, look how much space you have, right? And this was used from 1776 to probably up to 1920 as a potter's field for this section of Belchertown. There's probably a lot of burial up there, more than you think, because babies would be buried here. The death rate of children was horrifying. When cities started to form, it got worse. Now, if you look at the 1900 records of births and deaths, you'll especially see a lot of children being born and a lot of children dying. You can see it right through these registers. It was horrible, especially in places where it was very crowded with people. So in 1900, the average life expectancy of a person in Fall River, Massachusetts was 27 years old. And it's not because people didn't live long, sure. They would live to 60 years old or more. It's because so many children were dying in Fall River because there's so many people stuffed in the tenement houses that cholera and measles and dysentery spread very quickly and you couldn't stop it. In Holyoke and South Holyoke in 1919, the death rate was horrifying because of the influenza of 1918, 1919 hit there. If you look at the amount of deaths in South Holyoke compared to the rest of Holyoke, in that year in Holyoke, 600 people died. In South Holyoke, which was only contained 1/10 the population, 300 people died. And at that time, there were probably only about 1,500 people living in Holyoke in that neighborhood. So 1/5 of people died. Why? Because they were so clustered together. In Belchertown, you have a big advantage. You're spread out, right? But still, when you go back in time, the problem gets worse. If you look at 1800 death records, you see even more children dying than adults. And then 1700 gets even worse. So a lot of the space here is called a potter's field, but it's mostly filled with children. And the parents could not afford a full burial plot for the child, and so they were put here. Now, if you measure off how large a child is, and say at least half of this area is for a child, there's probably about 500 children here. And that's how big the problem was. The problem doesn't exist anymore. In fact, I believe out of every 1,000 deliveries, only one child dies at delivery, and then past that, almost every child lives. So the death rate of children is not there anymore. And people seem to be living longer, so instead of having Fall River's 27 years old, Massachusetts probably now has a life expectancy of about 75 years. It's an incredible difference. So this is all the potter's field. Why do you thus have stone, stone, stone? Well, long after the person died, the family would probably come to a little bit of money and say, oh, we should honor our aunt who died, and we want to put something there to recognize her. If you had come here in about 1900, you would have seen it not empty. It would have been filled with either one of two things, with wooden sticks put into the ground so the family would know where the person was, or with crosses. And these crosses would have been put right at the head of the person, and sometimes it etched in the initials. You can still see some of these in certain cemeteries. I've seen them in Notre Dame Cemetery in South Hadley. They're 120 years old and they're still there. But here they probably got worn out. The cemetery like this, where you have a lot of water flowing around, they probably rotted them away and they're gone. Okay, fence in great shape. Belchertown has a Community Preservation Act. Does this cemetery need it? Probably only a little bit. Remember, there's that double stone that was leaning against the tree. But for the most part, stones are in great shape, right? And this is a very nice cemetery. All right, any questions?
So is this actually all marked on a map someplace, so you should be able to find your child if you knew?
Probably that plat map is long gone. Probably the Belchertown government took over this cemetery sometime like 1766, and then they kept the information. I don't know if they still have the plat map. A lot of those plat maps, they just wear out. And since no one was being buried here, no one was caring. You can ask Belchertown, probably the engineering department might have it, or Department of Public Works, unless the Parks Department is in control.
You said people would say later we should place something to honor Aunt Nancy who died. How would they know where to put it?
Because you had that wooden stick there for a while.
So that you would put a wooden stick in when they were buried,
Yeah.
and then later they would, I see,
Yeah.
and then later they would create a stone or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was a very nice practice. And some families could afford just a little metal one, but those metal ones lasted. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you go to cemeteries and you can tell right away the potter's field because of those. But in this cemetery, no one was doing that. It's probably old sticks. Okay? All right, any more questions? All right, thanks for coming. And make sure I put in for South Cemetery and for Mount Hope Cemetery, and to do a presentation at the library of Belchertown called the Burial Grounds of Belchertown, where I go through all 10 cemeteries and I tell you their history. Where are the Catholics buried? Oops. Where are the Jewish people buried? Where are the Native American people buried? Right? Catholics were buried from Belchertown in 2 places because the Springfield Diocese set up Belchertown. It's so big they put a division between them. This section here is buried in the St. Bridget's Cemetery, Hadley. This section going this way is buried in the cemetery in Palmer. Right? Jewish people probably got buried in West Springfield or Springfield. And are there any Native Americans ever found in Belchertown? Not that I heard of. Are there any buried here? Yes. We just haven't found them yet. Okay, so I'm going to do that next year, and I hope to see you then. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I know.